So welcome everybody to Adult Forum after the first Sunday after Easter for St. Paul's Episcopal Church. I would like to welcome our speaker teacher for today is the wonderful, beautiful Martha Metzler, who is a part of our teaching team at St. Paul's, and she is a gifted licensed counselor in private practice here in Winston-Salem. And she is going to be speaking to us today on the topic of polarities, really the both and of life, and how this is lived out in the church as well as in our souls and in our hearts. So Martha, take us away.
Well, hey y'all. Okay, can I share the screen, Sarah? Did I do it? Am I doing it right?
Yeah.
Yay. Okay, good.
There you go.
There you go. Okay. Hey guys. What I was going to talk to you guys about today is about the both and dynamic that sort of has been a heart song of mine over this last pandemic year. And it's just sort of been something that I have found myself professionally and personally living in daily. I've had the honor of walking alongside clients who I've been with for a long time, but then also brand new clients who've been coming in and kind of getting counseling for the first time in their life. And professionally, that both and dynamic, I've seen hospitalizations over the last year. And then I've done premarital counseling with these new couples who are like beaming with contagious love. And I've had new parents who are challenged with working from home and trying to juggle homeschooling and virtual learning and still maintaining their careers. And these teenagers who are kind of home more than they have been the last several years. And like everybody, I think, is just wanting to go hug their favorite Trader Joe's checkout attendant just to be around someone who's not in their nuclear family. And if, the seniors in high school or college, oh my gosh, they have been living in such a total both and dynamic because they've worked their tails off and want to celebrate, but most of their schools aren't having large graduations or proms or this sort of grand pomp and circumstance that they thought they were going to get their senior year. But I am such a big believer in that we connect with ourselves and God more freely when we embrace the both and dynamic of life. I think it's the way we were designed to live. But our world kind of dupes us into thinking into polarities. Like we're either healthy or unhealthy. We're liberal or conservative. We're depressed or joyful. We're anxious or trusting. We're happy or sad. We're in want and plenty, fasting or feasting, solitude or community, totally too connected or unplugged. The list could go on, right? But what this message of polarity really is a big fat lie. It lies to us and makes us think that if we are towards the more negative end of the spectrum, we're doing it wrong. Or if it looks different than the person next to us, we're less than. And it also makes us wildly uncomfortable with the messy feelings that we're supposed to have, right? And we're supposed to feel this gamut of emotions. But a lot of y'all have heard me say it because it's sort of this like Martha mantra that I really believe our moxie comes when we learn how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And when we buy into the either or lie of the world, when we have those low dips, we're afraid we're failing. And if they last, we're afraid we're stuck. But we don't have to feel stuck. I believe in the very core of my being that we're designed to live in that both and, because it's where we get to experience freedom and who God wants us to be and where God wants us to be, even if it's in the want or in the plenty. I was walking with an amazing young woman and that I was doing some sort of walk and talk therapy with on the trails. And as we were walking, and when she sort of daily conquers this life of self-harm. And as we were walking, she realized she would feel such extreme shame anytime she experienced anxiety or low mood. And she expressed that she was so afraid of hurting herself again because of these big feelings that she sort of started to shove them down instead. But then on the other hand, she was also really proud of herself that she wasn't hurting herself anymore. So that she sort of felt like then her brain and heart turned into this like emotional blender, and she shut down and she didn't know which one to feel. And I said, oh man, like this humanity thing is kind of a big bummer sometimes, isn't it? And she was like, okay, I realize that you're trying to do some sort of message to me right here, but I just want you to tell me which emotion's the right one to feel so I can feel that one. And I feel like we all kind of feel that way at some point, right? Like, and some multiple points. Like sometimes I feel like my 7-year-old son who like goes from belly laughing 1 minute to like screaming, this is the worst day of my life in a matter of 30 minutes, because we could feel all the feels in one day, y'all. And I even I was cracking up at this little meme because if y'all watch The Office, where it's talking about Michael Scott, he goes from feeling my brain going from lonely to happy to anxious to depressed and then to sleepy, like all in 5 minutes. But when I looked at her and I kind of said, like, all of them are right because they're yours. You aren't meant for the either or one emotion. You're meant to live fully in all of them. And you can both allow yourself those big feelings and to feel them and to give yourself the grace and the space to do so. And know that you've worked too hard to let those emotions lie to you and shame you into hurting yourself or feeling like you're failing, and that you're not stuck there. Our God is the most creative designer. Do you think he created us for the either or? No. He designed us into dynamic beings who experience real and hard and messy and joyful emotions. I mean, look at our Savior. He modeled the both and all throughout Scripture. Look in the garden. He knew the plan. He trusted the plan. But he went to his Father with his grief and with his sorrow and with his hurt. And he went before the Lord and he said, like, if this can be taken from me, please take it. But if it can't, not my will, but yours. Y'all, if that's not the most painfully real display of living in the both and, I don't know what is. When we allow ourselves the space to truly experience the emotions that we're feeling and claim truth over them, we feel freedom and authenticity and steps towards wholeness. When we feel like we have to choose between the either or, that's when shame can kind of creep in and make you think that you should be feeling something else or what you're feeling isn't the right thing. And so there's no greater roadblock to transformation than shame. And so when you actually allow yourself to feel whatever you're feeling, even if it's multiple things at once, and claim truth into that emotion, wholeness does start to happen. In my office, the look on people's faces when I tell them that they can experience multiple emotions at once, sometimes they look at me like I've got this like unicorn horn coming out of my forehead. Like, I remember I was telling one, I was like, yes, you can be angry, and follow it up with a hopeful declaration, you won't be angry forever. And they looked at me and they were like, okay, so anger and hope, like all in the same sentence? And I said, yeah, that's what you're designed for. You don't have to choose. And I think that looking at the year of this pandemic, I think it's taught me anything. It's that I can allow myself to lament and hope and let those collide in my heart and echo through my prayers. I can lament that this year has been so hard in so many ways and also claim God's goodness and faithfulness. And I only feel connected and at peace when I allow myself to experience both of those things. And I know he gets it. My friend Meredith always says, we have a maker who can contain all of our heavy and make our load light. Our relationship with him can also live in that both and. And it's not just with our emotional and mental well-being that this dynamic works, even though I could talk about it forever. And true story, like my old coworker made me a t-shirt that said, feelings. And then on the back, it said, ... they're kind of my thing. And so I really could talk about the dynamic of both and with our feelings. Have you guys, and I know like there's in the chat box, because I'll pull it up so I can read. Have you guys in this year especially experienced any of that both and dynamic with our emotional mental health experience within yourself?
While people are taking a second to write in the chat box about that, everything that you're saying about like the layers of feelings reminds me of that wonderful animated movie Inside Out.
Yeah.
Amy Poehler is the main voice of the character, and like this little girl and her story, if you've not seen the movie, is like just growing up, and she moves to a new town, and she looks back on a memory that she has of like celebrating. I think she won like a hockey game or something, and she like looks back on the experience, and like all of her feelings come out as these little orbs that are glowing different colors, and like red is angry and green is sort of peaceful, and blue is sad, and like the feeling that comes back now, her orbs are multicolored because they have the same, like exactly what you're talking about, Martha, with the feelings are sort of mixed together. Like that memory is happy, and yet it's also sad because it's a town that she's moved away from, and the nostalgia of what was lost as well as the joy that she once felt. It's so, it's Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. It's the, standing with Lazarus and with Martha and Mary after Lazarus's death. Like it's that mix of emotions beautifully together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I get to him, like I just feel like what I've been clinging to so much in this is like what a gift it is that he modeled that for us, right? Like this isn't something that we can like culturally modern day make up. Like Christ modeled it for us throughout scripture, which is such a beautiful gift, I think, to our wholeness. Looking at so Elizabeth Allen, she said, when my father died last February, surrounded by close friends at a conference, I experienced profound joy in the midst of grieving. She just said it was so unexpected and so amazing. Sweet Elizabeth, thank you so much for sharing that. That's that both and, what an incredible picture. Jack, you said I'd felt tired but hopeful, angry and compassionate, sad and loving. Oh, I love this one. Bewildered and safe at the same time. Oh, Jack, that's so good. I might have to steal that one, buddy. Sorry. Bewildered and safe at the same time. Oh, so good.
Martha, that could be the title of your next book.
Seriously. Yeah. But don't worry. I'll be like, Jack Scruggs. Oh, that's so good. Oh, Margie says, depending on one's Enneagram type, we can't get through a St. Paul's adult formation class without some sort of like Hail Mary to the Enneagram. Okay. Dealing with polarity can either be manageable or very difficult. That's true. For the feeling and heart types, it can be overwhelming. It's so true. It can be. But I do want to encourage you that you have, first of all, your Enneagram type is not a surprise to God, right? Like he made that in you. And so he has equipped you to process those big feelings. And that when they do feel overwhelming, I do just want to encourage you to lean in to them, because you have been so uniquely equipped to process them in the way that you were designed to process them, whether it's with your mind or whether it's with your heart. It is, or both, right? Like it's, I know it feels overwhelming, but take heart, because you have been uniquely designed to process them and feel them. Thank y'all for putting those in. With like I said, it's not just in the emotional and mental health arena of our lives that we get to experience that both and. We also get to experience it in worship. And so in the translations of Julian of Norwich, so she's a mystic from the 1300s. And I do want to say, okay, before you think I'm some smarty pants theologian, I am not. I have learned about her through Richard Rohr's writings. And I can assure you, so my seminary professors, one gently, like in my final meeting, they were like, so we don't know if theology is your thing. We think counseling might be your thing. So I like to read about people who recap all of these really incredible smarty pants. And then Sarah is like my Google, where I'll text her and be like, okay, what does this mean? But I really love her writing, because I think she is eloquently sums up how to connect with God in the both and dynamic that we inevitably found ourselves in. And so this is one of her quotes that I just love so much, where she said, during our lives here on earth, we experience a wondrous mixture of well and woe. We hold inside us both the glory of the risen Christ and the misery of the fallen Adam. Christ protects us in our dying, and through his gracious touch, uplifts us and reassures us that all will be well. We are so fragmented and afflicted in our feelings in so many ways that we hardly know where to turn for comfort. The various pains and transgressions of this life fill our hearts with sorrow and cloud the eyes of our souls. The mixture of sorrow and joy is so powerful that we cannot figure out how to handle it all, let alone assess how our fellow spiritual seekers are doing. The diversity of feelings can be overwhelming. So Margie, you're not alone. And yet, in those moments when we sense the presence of God, we surrender to him, truly willing to be with him with all of our heart and with all of our soul and with all of our strength. And this holy assent is all that matters. It eclipses all the wicked inclinations inside of us, physical and spiritual, that might lead us to miss the mark. So it can be overwhelming. We're just supposed to draw up, turn our eyes to the Lord and lean into them. I don't want to leave. Sandra just posted something in the chat that I do want to share. She had said, I have been so sad for losing time with the people I love and not being able to touch them at times. However, I feel I have grown being alone, though, by reaching out to closeness to God, and I now appreciate so more being in the present. Yes, I love that. And that's, and Margie, you said being in tune, aware, and thankful for the good things in our lives that have come out of quarantine versus our awareness of COVID's awfulness and grief. Yeah, that both and, right? Like we can experience that this year has been so hard and see the ways that it has gotten us out of our comfort zone and made us see connection in other ways. We get to worship him in different ways. The fasting and feasting, we get to worship him in reverent, silent prayer and with the raising of hands, and experiencing worship as a community and in the quiet hours of the morning with just you and the Lord and his word. And we learn to live fully in each season and cry out in both the want and the plenty. And we need to both serve dutifully while acknowledging the necessity of rest. We need that dynamic of the both and to make this connection with God that have the depth that it allows. Our feasts will not feel like feasts if we haven't already fasted, right? Erin Moon, she's an author, and she writes some articles that I really enjoy. And she says that our feast days are only as satisfying as the fast it accompanies. And then we can worship in both silence or with the liturgy that's so ingrained in our hearts, and also feel moved by the Spirit and raise our hands if we feel led. But y'all, I will say, I remember the first time I raised my hands at church, and this poor lady in front of me, I think, thought I was about to swat a fly on the back of her head or snap her purse. She like flinched. And I was like, oh, sorry. Sorry, I'll keep it contained. So just maybe, give some forewarning. Or just get people out of their comfort zone, like I think fully enjoy doing. Um, and just as Christ showed us while he was here, you can connect with God both in fellowship and in community and on a mountaintop in solitude. Worshiping together in St. Paul's is such a balm when we feel alone. Um, the way that our voices echo together every time we say the confession of sins, the Nicene Creed, it gets me every time. And all of us just claiming that truth together. And then don't even get me started on that, like the amount of weeping that happens on this girl's face in the foot washing ceremony. It's not a pretty scene, I'll tell you. But being able to come together like that and experience worship in that way as a community. And has this been, good grief, you guys, has this year been such a wake-up call on the necessity of worshiping together? We need it. But we also need that individualized faith walk. He wants us to have that intentional alone time with him too, whether it's on a walk or whether it's in the quiet hours of the morning or late at night after kids go to bed. It's finding that time that's marked just for you and God. Be vulnerable with him with whatever both and that you're feeling. So guys, what are some both in that chat box? What are some both and ways that you experience worship? And then also maybe that in ways that you had experienced before that maybe this past year has made you feel lacking in ways that you worship.
I think about the season, especially with the like Palm Sunday. I'm going to preach a sermon one day on how I think Palm Sunday is spiritual whiplash. Because we go from like a big parade and a hosanna and the waving of the palm branches to crying out, crucify him. And that's the journey like that Holy Week takes us, is that from Palm Sunday all the way through Holy Week is we are feeling all the feels along with Jesus. And then we get to Easter and everything changes. Like our alleluias are like outpouring every time we turn around in the liturgy, we're saying alleluia. And it feels a little bit like the both and of being in these seasons of deep praise and joy, and yet the incredible coming to terms with one's own like sinfulness and like a sense of like I would have been in the crowd yelling, crucify him. I would have been in that group think of the people of Jerusalem demanding death, because that's what human beings do. And like the both and spiritually that we go through in Holy Week and then now in Eastertide can feel a little queasy at times because it's whiplash. It's like we're going from such intense feelings of loss to such intense feelings of joy. And I think that that's on purpose.
Right. Yeah. And that's right. Like it's what better, like also that tension that we live in, the already, but not yet, that we are humanity and redeemed all in the same, of not being fully fit.
Here and now, and the kingdom is one day to come. Yeah.
Right. Like that dynamic. What about like spiritual whiplash? I love that phrase. Okay, sweet Elizabeth Allen, that you always have such an incredible way with words. I just started reading and like already felt some truth tears popping into my eyes. She says, I miss the textures of the wood and the hugs from friends and the congregational singing, ways that we use our senses to worship and fellowship with other people. However, this year I've learned to go a little deeper in my personal worship alone with God. Yes. And both, right? Like both are worthy of our praise. Like both are worthy of the depth of our worship with him and our connection with him. Right. And Jack, he said,
Martha, can I just say, as an extrovert, and this goes to what Jack says right below there, as an extrovert, I get joy out of something by looking at the person next to me and just smiling or saying, oh, that's wonderful. And, and by yourself, it's just that sharing of that joy is just not there as much. So that's one of the things I miss. And Jack says, I miss singing in the choir, and I miss singing in the congregation and hearing all the other voices, anyway.
No, I love that. I'm so thankful for your wisdom in each class. I feel like you do have such a great way of words, and I'm so thankful. I do, but I just, even just the sense that, the things that you can't get online, right? I'm so thankful that we are still able to worship together online and and safely recognize that the sacredness of people's health, and and yearn for us all to be back together. And me shushing my kids in the pews and letting them do their race cars along the top, and feeling that the padded kneeling benches on, that things that appeal to our senses that you just can't get from online, while still being thankful that it has gotten us, I think, outside of our comfort zone of pursuing that personal faith, worship with him. Yeah, I love that.
And Martha, I think I've heard you say before in teaching in the past that like none of us can be a Christian alone, and that like the social aspect of our faith is so it's built into our DNA because we are social creatures. I mean, we were made by God to depend on each other and to so naturally, like we have to adjust, like Elizabeth is saying, like we've had to adjust to go deeper in the personal individual worship, like that's such an important learning, but it's uncomfortable, which is I think what you're lifting up, Martha, this like discomfort of, well, I don't want to do that, I want to be with my friends, I want to see people, I want to hug them, and God instead says this is an invitation to go outside of your comfort zone into individual work. Yeah, it's hard.
It is. Nancy, you had you shared, you said, I have worshiped through the changing of seasons, both the bareness of winter and the full color of spring. And I wish I could show you guys outside of it. We have all these like azalea bushes in our backyard, and just being able to experience like, okay, new life, warm weather, that new life coming after this bareness of winter. Oh, yeah, Linda, I get that. But she said, I attended indoors worship today and cried after communion. I had missed it so much. And sometimes you don't ever know how much you miss it until you experience it again. And it feels overwhelming, but in a balming, a way that feels like balm, right? To a wound you maybe didn't even know was a true wound.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank y'all for commenting. I know, like, even just the both and dynamic of in the daily living, like I remember my like world was bust open when I realized that there was such a thing as introverts who then just didn't want to be shut-ins. Like I could authentically want to be with my people and laugh, but while still recognizing that like I kind of turn into a version of Tanya Harding if I don't get enough alone quiet time. And being able to recognize that in myself and being intentional with it. I thought there was something wrong with me for the longest time when I felt so exhausted and wanted that alone and craved that alone time. But now I kind of allow myself to discern which one I need to be intentional with in that moment, alone time or gathering people around my table. They both are a part of my personality. And I, for some reason, maybe it was the Myers-Briggs phenomenon made me feel like I needed to choose. But I don't. I can have both. And even, I know we touched on it before, like guys, like Zoom in general, like I love it and I hate it all at the same time, right? Like I'm thankful for it. I've experienced such both and about wanting like real people, life, senses, connection, like Elizabeth was talking about. And, but also recognizing how thankful I am that I still get to talk to some of my clients via Zoom while they were quarantined and let them know that they weren't alone. I still get to laugh with my brother and my nieces in Scotland, when our travel plans to see them got canceled. But I also get to yearn for the time to be in the chapel teaching this class with you guys and being able to engage and hug you and instead of shoved in a corner of my bedroom where my kids can't find me. I want that. I'm grateful, and I can't wait to be in person. And even things that were someone about to say something. I don't want to interrupt you.
I just saw that Anne has her hand raised.
Oh yeah,
be a good time to chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anne, if you want to unmute. Let's see. There you are. Oh,
I guess you're talking to me.
Yeah, your hand is raised.
I think I accidentally hit
Oh,
something.
Okay.
Sorry.
Wait, I thought you were just trying out the raising of the hands worship, like we had talked about earlier, maybe,
Well,
Zoom worship. Zoom worship.
But Tina has a little hand raised at the bottom of her little part of my screen here. So maybe somebody else has their hand raised also.
Sarah, do you see it? I can't see it, but I don't want to ignore anybody.
No, I just see your hand, and I don't see anybody else raising their hand right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe my tablet got mixed up.
That's all right.
That's,
but yeah,
that's part of this new technical stuff we have to, put up with, I guess.
I know it is. And even things that sort of feel on the surface like that both and, when I feel frustrated or confused, I let myself feel frustrated and confused and follow it up with that gratitude and truth that, even if my heart has kind of a full, hard to fully get on board with it, right? Sometimes that's part of living in the tension, Sarah, of what you talked about earlier, that the tension of already but not yet.
Yeah.
Is redirecting our thoughts and our actions towards truth with the leap of faith that our heart will eventually catch up.
Yeah, beautifully said. Yeah.
And it's not easy. And, like Margie kind of alluded to, it can feel overwhelming and exhausting, but not as exhausting as limiting ourselves to one emotion or one way of worship or one way of living. We're cheating ourselves of that sometimes messy, but always dynamic way of living that we've been created for, right? We have to give ourselves that permission to live messily and boldly in that both and.
Thank you, Annie.
Elizabeth, do you want to unmute and share what you just wrote?
Yeah, well, I just said, Episcopalians are fairly formal and fairly conservative. I don't mean politically, just, the way it's supposed to be. And so maybe we just see that, I don't know, we mute our joy and we mute our sadness so that it's just in the middle, and that's what we show. And then we sort of feel like the ups and the downs are cut off.
Oh, what that red stuff is.
So anyway, as somebody who has learned in other traditions to raise my hands and dance and whatever, not in an Episcopal church, but other places, I don't do that. The only thing I do is the first little paragraph of the communion service, when it says we lift our hearts up, I lift my hand like this underneath the prayer book. So I don't, get anybody upset or anything. But it's hard to show your sadness. I mean, I think most of us, at least women, do get tearful at times, but I think we just kind of lop off those parts and only show the middle part.
And it can feel restraining, right? And Elizabeth, yeah, exactly. And you can always come, you can get a little wild and crazy over the balcony with me and the boys if you want to raise your hands, during some worship. We're up there in the balcony getting weird. But I get it. Like we do, and that's where that middle, we cheat ourselves, right? Of the, but like that, you said the joy and that sorrow. And when we allow ourselves to float between the two and move freely between the two, we get to know ourselves and we get to know our God in different and more, just so much more dynamic ways. Does anybody else want to throw anything in before we wrap up? Yeah.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, sorry, Margie. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
Yes, I realize that now you can't see that I'm making eye contact with you.
The place that has been such a both and for me, and with the whole feeling, all the emotions, is the whole dynamic the last 4 years of family and friends being politically different than me, than myself, and where that puts you. Because I'm always try to be the devil's advocate, or try to be everybody, let's get along. And well, maybe they think that way because, but it's so much like, no, I can't, you hear agree to disagree isn't okay when this other faction believes in things that are maybe inhumane or whatever we think badly about that particular side. And it's just really hard for me because I want everybody to be happy and care about each other. And maybe before Facebook, that was easy to be able to live next to somebody who is total opposite and very challenging in that respect. Just about how to, I don't know, does it have to be that way? And does it have, I don't know, it's just confusing. And when I was talking about being so difficult with all the emotions and being the, you could probably guess 4 that I am, I don't know. I don't know how to do all that. And I do go to shame if I think badly about somebody, but at the same time, I feel shame when somebody on my side of it says you shouldn't agree with them, or you shouldn't, whatever. It's just such a, like I have wonderful neighbors, but they believe differently. And sometimes it's extremely differently, and it's very hard.
It is.
Can you be a good neighbor and still have that? I don't know. I'm not making sense, but
no, I think you are making sense. Yeah, I think you are making sense. And I think that a lot of us can resonate with that, no matter whatever side you're on, right? And I think that, and I have to believe that, yes, you can still be a good neighbor and love outside of the, I think that without falling too much of the, well, we're going to agree to disagree, and just sort of let that boil underneath of, but I still don't like what you're about. There's not a clear answer, right? Because, and we don't want all carbon copies of ourselves.
Well, and a lot of times people will say, no, I can't be their friend because,
right.
I mean, we disagree, and I just can't be their friend because they believe X, Y, and Z. And I don't know. It's really,
no, you really have that really great phrase of, being a good neighbor, which, like, I really like that phrase, being a good neighbor, because the word friend is really complicated. Like, we have a lot of different definitions for the word friend. And, like, I don't know, I think being a good neighbor has a lot to do with generosity. And that's something that, like, generosity in like, your garden produces a ton of squash, and you go over to your neighbors and bring them a bag of squash, or you join them when their dog gets lost, and you run around the neighborhood helping them look for their lost dog. Like, those are the things that a good neighbor does. And that's generosity. That's a posture of generosity that you have toward them. You don't have to agree with their politics, but you're there to be generous to one another. And I have seen that kind of friendship, and it's not a best friend kind of friendship where you bare your soul and talk about your differences. It's a presence more than it is a a deep emotional connection. And that's, I don't know. Martha, what do you think about that? I really love
I
that
agree.
good neighbor language.
No, agree. I love that. And I think that also when we are able to love people without expectations, there's less room for that disappointment or resentment or frustration, because you're able to remove the expectations that they can be someone that they are saying they can't be, right? When we kind of are able to love people just as they are. And I'm not saying, again, I like that, like, loving people just as they are doesn't mean you're going to like get best friend necklaces made with them and like invite them on family vacations. No, like, but recognize them, you know, as a child of God, recognize them as a fellow human being without expecting them to be someone who they can't be. There does allow more room for connection in whatever connection that's going to look like for that particular person. And I like, you know, whether it's neighborly bringing some squash, whether it's just throwing up some prayers for them, whether, you know, it's, or whether it is like gathering them around your table, even if it is crazy uncomfortable, whatever God leads you to do in a way that's going to connect with them. You know, it's, I don't think you're, I know that it's hard, but I don't, you know, I think that, I like that neighborly language, because I think that you also have to allow yourself to know that, like, with healthy boundaries too, not engaging in something that's just going to stir up disconnection when neither one's going to change their mind, or, you know, where it only is with an agenda, because, you know, love with an agenda is not love at all, right? And so, or not true love. So it's, you know, being able to see people as fellow humans, figure out how to, whether it is just through prayer or whether it is through bringing them gourds of, you know, what does that look like? What does connection with them look like as a neighbor, even when we're totally different?
Well, and in family, you know, it's really, really hard. That's the worst, probably, because if you've got dichotomies on both, you know, in your family, that it's just, I don't know. But anyway.
Yeah.
So wait,
This is Deborah. Could I make a comment?
Sure.
I'm sorry, did I interrupt someone? I think I did. I didn't mean to do that. But I have been in the midst of this kind of situation for the last number of weeks, and have really struggled with the whole, you know, it was a political driven thing, and got a really crappy text from a very long time standing friend of mine. Her daughter is my goddaughter, who's having a baby in like 3 weeks. Her son is getting married this month. So it's just like all these emotions are all running together. And I don't want to cut her off as a friend. And so I just called and said, can we just get together and talk? You know, because it kind of comes back to the humanity comment that I made a little bit earlier. It's like friends are too important, you know, family's too important to give it up for something like this. And I really want to work it out. And, you know, I've kind of gone back and forth with what should I do? What should I not do? And so we're going to get together on Tuesday and just chat. I mean, I just think there's too much at stake to give. Does that make any sense to anyone? You know, too much at stake to give it up. And yeah, so I've really struggled with the whole thing. I prayed about it. You know, it's like, what do I do? Do I ignore it and just like forget about her as a friend? I don't think so. I don't want to do that. And so anyway, yeah, I mean, there are things that you struggle with, but hopefully we'll come out on the good side of it. So anyway, just wanted to mention that it's been a hard.
So Martha, this is Elizabeth. I have a really good a short example of this working out in an unexpected way. Warren's family has as does mine, has a very wide variety of political views. And a member of his family posted something that he really didn't agree with, but he didn't want to get involved in that at that point. So he posted on his own Facebook page, posted something related and but very kind. And then the first person asked, "Oh, I didn't know." Oh no, and then another family member said, "Oh, you know, there's a group of people who help." This was about an immigration somehow or the other. I didn't read it actually, but you know, there's a group of people who help these people, and the first person got on there and said, "Well, tell me who it is. I'll give them a contribution." So sometimes I think we just make an assumption that other people are, you know, not going to, can't see, and somehow this two people helped somebody else see around the corner, and we all realized that, oh, we can all see around the corner with a little bit of help.
Yeah, I like that. I think well, let's wrap on that positive wisdom. Because I think that obviously, you know, there is you know, people are popping up on the chats that I think that everybody can say they have been in a situation like this in one way or another, right? And a lot of y'all have shared such great wisdom saying, like, I've just tried to see them as a child of God, or I've tried to see that they are made in the image of God just as I am. And that's been so helpful. You know, and then Elizabeth, thank you for that, like real time example. And thank y'all so much for hopping on and just talking with me about this both and dynamic that I've sort of been walking through daily. And so I'm thankful I got to chat with you guys and sit with you today, even if it is shoved in the back corner of my bedroom.
And Martha, thank you so much for guiding us through this conversation. I mean, I think the way that it gets everybody stirred up, we all have things to say is, I mean, you've picked such a wonderfully relevant topic for all of us. So thank you for guiding us through this.
Can I ask a quick question of something she said that I missed?
Yeah.
When you were talking about the thing about our feast days, are only as what?
They're only as, let's see, so it is as our fast, let's see, it's Erin Moon, and she says our feasts are only as engaging or as depth as the fast that it accompanies.
Engaging, the word? I missed the word.
Let me see. I wrote her quote down. Let's see. Erin, so she said, our feast days are only as satisfying as the fast it accompanies.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
That's journal fodder.
No, I get it. I wrote her quote down as soon as I had read it in one of her Lenten studies, and so it's yeah, so only as satisfying as the fast it accompanies.
That's good. That's so good. Martha, thank you. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. I want to tell folks that next week we are going to be beginning a Bible study with Dixon. He's going to be leading us through Bible stories in the scriptures that we heard growing up, but we have never really heard much again in church, and to unpack them and really see what they're saying. So stories like Genesis, like the creation and the story of the flood and the Noah and the ark. So childhood scripture stories and what they mean for us now as adults. So I hope you will join us. That'll be a 4-week course that'll take us through the end of the program year right before Pentecost in May. So it's going to be good. I hope to see you next week.